Howdy folks. Well, as you can see, we got the Christmas tree up today. Had a dreary, rainy day here in Oklahoma today. It was a perfect day to clean up the house and put the tree up. And we got a lot done cleaning up, and I was going through my paperwork and I came across this invoice from Country Home Meat Company, my butcher, and I thought that I did another video on this, but I didn't get into the exact cuts and how many cuts and the cost. So I wanted to do that real quick. I also wanted to mention this Christmas tree here on the counter beside me. It might be hard to see, but this is rebar that's welded into a Christmas tree, just rusty rebar. And my niece made that for me a couple years ago, and I think she was 14 at the time when she made this. And this little ornament here as well, it's steel and it's cut out and of course painted, but anyway, how cool is that? 14-year-old welding rebar Christmas trees. I told her, man, she could make these and sell them on Etsy or craft fairs or whatever and probably make some good money. So anyway, I need to check on that, see if she's done that. But anyway, let's get to the nuts and bolts of this video. So I brought this steer in. It's been a few weeks ago, and Country Home Meats was built in the 50s, if I remember right. And so the holding pens and the chutes and alleys and scale and all that kind of stuff, it's definitely not made for Longhorn cattle. And that's what this was, is a Longhorn steer, about 3 years old, and probably about 1,000 pounds live weight. That's kind of been my experience over the years. That's what about the size I bring them in. It'd be about 3 years old, and that's where I like to process them, about that weight. Now these are Longhorns that are on grass only, of course hay in the winter. They get cattle cubes when it's really, really cold out, which in Oklahoma here doesn't happen that often. We may go through a couple little spurts here and there over a winter where it's really cold, but when I mean really cold, I mean, you know, I usually, if it's going to be 20s or below, I will give them some cubes. It just kind of keeps their bellies warm, as I say, and keeps the weight on a little bit, helps out. So anyways, so I don't have a live weight from the butcher because they can't fit a Longhorn into the scales or the chute. So I'm guessing around 1,000 pounds. So now what I do have is this invoice here, and I have my dressed weight, which also is known as carcass weight or hanging weight, or on the rail. It's called a lot of different things, but basically the steer is gutted and skinned, and no head, no bottom half of their leg. I guess it would be kind of similar to their elbow down, if you want to elbow and knee down off, and hanging in halves. So this steer was 619 pounds hanging weight. And so they give you that weight, and they also give you a take-home weight, which is your meat in individual cuts, packaged up in boxes, home in your freezer. And that is on this steer was 406 pounds. Now the reason why you have such a loss is there's a lot of bone, and boy, I don't know. T-bones are bone-in cuts. Trying to think of what else is a bone-in cut that I keep. I don't keep beef ribs from a Longhorn. I don't keep beef ribs. There's not enough meat on there. It's just, I've tried it before several times. And I even had a buddy of mine who's like a master barbecue guy. I mean, they were good. It just wasn't worth the effort. So what the butcher does is they take the little strip of meat in between the ribs out, and it gets ground into hamburger or ground beef. So 406 pounds in packages in the freezer. That's about right. Or I should say it's about normal for what I bring in. So on this steer, Chief and I, as we unloaded it, she kept count of everything that we got off of this steer. So it ended up being, now back up, I only had a couple of roasts made out of this steer because we just had a steer butchered not too long ago, and I usually get about 8 to 10 roasts. You could get more if you wanted less ground beef, but we use more ground beef than we do roasts. You know, a long time ago, the butcher up there, Robert and Jesse, they told me, well, hey, if you think about it, a roast, you typically eat roasts in the wintertime, fall, winter, maybe spring. It's not something you eat in the summer a lot, which makes sense. And so if you figure you have a roast every other week for the cool and cold months of the year, you know, you can figure up in Oklahoma, you've got, we'll say half of November, December, so that's 3, January, February, and maybe half of March. So that's 8 roasts. And for us, that's why I do 8, maybe 10. So we have some roast left over from that last steer. So on this one, I only did 4 total. So we'll get to that. But the bottom line is if you don't make roast, don't get the roasts. If you were to buy a whole beef or a half beef and you call in your custom order and you just want steaks and ground beef, you can certainly do that. Nothing's going to go to waste. So these roasts, if you don't eat them or you don't want them, they will be ground into ground beef. So it's not like they're just going to throw that away or keep it themselves or whatever. So this steer was 281 pounds of ground beef. There was 4 tenderloins or filet mignon, and in a Longhorn they're small. I mean they're I don't know, 3-4 ounce maybe. 25 ribeyes, 24 T-bones, 20 sirloins, and then, like I said, I did less roast than normal. I did 2 arm roasts and 2 chuck roasts, and there's 1 hanger steak. And I keep everything, even if it's not something we're gonna eat, because we feed a lot of raw meat to our dogs. We have 4 Great Pyrenees, and they're big old dogs, and they eat a lot. And I don't think dog food has as much nutrition in it than raw meat. I mean, it definitely doesn't have as much nutrition, but so I keep everything. So I also have a package of cheek meat, which is it's a lot of fat on the cheeks of the steer. Of course, the tail, oxtail is what they call it, the tongue, the heart, the liver. I don't know how all butchers do it, but our butcher kind of cuts the liver into pieces, maybe that long by that wide by that thick, kind of strips, and puts them in these little containers about that big around. So I had 9 of those little bowls, which it's probably not the whole liver, but sometimes they'll condemn portions of the liver due to it may just not look good, or I mean, that's an organ that is a filter, so there might be parts of it that they throw away just to be safe. There's also 5 packages of cut up bone with meat kind of on the edges, and that's for stews or bone broth, stuff like that. And then there's also bone that's chunked up, that's really quite clean. There's no meat on it. Again, for bone broth, we feed it to our dogs as well. So like the bones without the meat, or the meat, we don't eat liver. We should, because liver's probably the healthiest food on earth. But so anyway, these are things that a lot of times get fed to our dogs, or if I have friends that really like any of these cuts, I'll share with them, give it to them. So anyways, that was what ended up in our freezer. So now I will share the cost, and I think a lot of people will probably be surprised by the costs. It's just the cost of butchering an animal has gone up considerably in the last 10 years that I've been doing this, my own pork and beef. And it's not that the butchers are making a killing, or the processors are not making a killing, but their cost to if they're renting a building or facility. Robert owns this building, but I don't know if it's paid for or whatever, but taxes always go up. Of course, labor costs always go up, and that's a big one. And then there's also a lot of other things that people don't think about, such as this processor. They have to hire a rendering company to come pick up all the intestines and all the hide and all the unwanteds. And he told me that years and years ago, it used to be that they would come pick it up for free, because they would sell it to dog food companies probably, or pet food companies, and it gets made into pet food, so there's profit to be made. Um, but now it's the cost. Now they charge for the pickup, plus the rendering companies are making money selling it to whoever to make the dog food. But the price of that has gone up and up and up. You also, of course, have electricity and gas for hot water. So my point is the cost for the processor has gone up considerably, and you know what that means. It gets, like any other business, that gets passed on to the consumer, because if it doesn't, then they're not going to be in business long. So, that's just the way it goes. So, I've got kind of a breakdown. Your processing costs can vary greatly. So, if there's extra cost if you want stew meat made, because there's a lot of labor involved in chunking that up into 1x1 cubes. There is charges that says extra boning, and I'm not really sure. I didn't have any charge for that, but I'm not really sure what that would be. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you were to get something fancy like the tomahawk steaks, where the rib bone is still connected to the rib eye, and that all has to be cleaned up. I don't know. I'm sure there's other fancy cuts out there that there's extra boning to be done, and that again is labor. There is pre-made hamburger patties, and again, it's labor. And then there is some special tools for that. But for me, this was $1.05 a pound for the processing. And there's also a kill fee, is what they call it. I don't see that on here, but there is definitely one. So, I'm not sure how much that was. Maybe it's included in the processing overall price now, I'm not sure. But regardless, my total was $759, and that's to process this whole steer. So, as you can see, it's not cheap, but there's a lot of labor in it, and there are a lot of special tools if you want it done, where the steaks are, exactly the same thickness, and the ground beef is packaged, these are in kind of tubes, and you can make them however big. I did 1 pound packages because with 3 kids out of the house and only 1 here, sometimes we just need 1 pound of hamburger. So I do that. I used to do 2 pound packages because we always needed at least 2 pounds for anything we were doing. So anyway, these are in 1 pound packages is what I do now. So there's also extra charge for if you want your being a state. This is a state inspected facility, so you can sell third party. So if you wanted your own label on the on each individual package, you can do that for an extra charge, and also have the weight say on everything, the package of steaks, every 1 pound package. I mean, they're not exactly 1 pound. They're pretty darn close though. I've seen anything from, they're literally 1/10 of a pound off, either way. It's pretty, the machine is really efficient. And it's anywhere from 9 to 1.1 pounds. So really, really accurate. But anyway, if you wanted the exact weight, this place anyway, they will do that. I'm sure anywhere would do that. But again, it's a lot of labor, and they're going to charge you for it. So, there's a lot of specialty stuff you can do, and it gets very costly. But I read off all the cuts that I got, and you're still looking at $759. So I'm sure there are custom places that are cheaper than this. I use a custom place, and I'm not going to say which one, but it was a facility here in central Oklahoma, and it was a long time ago, and I was not happy with it at all. Handling these carcasses is, if it's not done right, it can totally ruin your meat, your product. And so my suggestion is cheaper is not always best, and I would recommend, if you're doing your own animals, raising your own animals for butcher, and you're not going to do it yourself, the butchering yourself, or if you're buying, even if you're buying a half or a whole from somebody else, I would highly recommend that that there's a good relationship with the person raising the animal and the processor or the butcher. That goes a long way. I've mentioned in several other videos, I have really, it's been worth it for me to stick around after I drop a steer off up here at Country Home Meat. I'll stick around. I'll even watch it be, put down and skinned, gutted, everything, hanging on the rail, as they call it, and being brought into the freezer. And I'll stick around and I'll talk to all the guys that are doing this work, including Jesse and Robert. And I ask a lot of questions, and I've really gotten to know really all these people, and it goes a long way to making sure that I'm getting the product that I want, whether it be certain cuts or and it goes a long way to understanding how all this works. So anyways, I just wanted to share that with you, and I hope that makes sense. And maybe if you're buying beef from someone, whether it be a whole, half, or quarter, that person may tell you well, here's the butcher's name and phone number if you'll call in your order, right? That, there are options. And if the butcher's not telling you your options, then you should maybe find a new butcher. I know that's easier said than done, but anyways, my recommendation is, if you're in Oklahoma, call Country Home Meat Company in Edmond, off of Waterloo Road, and talk to Robert or Jesse, and they will get you fixed up. I just can't say enough good about them. So they're not a huge facility, so the quality control is just incredible. And they're a family-owned business, and they do a really great job. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you on the next video.